Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast, episode 80. Today it's a special episode. It's a celebratory episode as well, because reaching episode 80 in 10 months that the podcast has been on is something that it is amazing. So I thought for this episode to do a reflection, but in a very new way for me. So I'm going to do a reflection of these past months, taking the opportunity from the podcast, but I also want to discuss some other things. And I have brought some visual cues in front of me just to inspire me, shall we say, to speak about some things that I wanted to speak about in the terms of reflection. And I'm a big believer in doing self-reflection. As a matter of fact, I do it daily, weekly, quarterly, annually. It's a great tool that allows me to grow and improve. But this is actually because I always write my reflection down. This today is actually the first time that I'm going to do the reflection saying it out, and not just to myself but also to the audience of the podcast. So I'm happy to share my inner thoughts with you all, and I hope you find useful and valuable what I'm going to share. So, as I said, I have brought some visual cues, and the first one that I'm going to use to start, and it is directly related to the fact that it's the 80th episode, it's how overjoyed I am with the growth of this podcast, Personal Development Mastery. It is, I'm really grateful to see what has been happening, the reviews, the amazing 5-star reviews I've been getting, the messages, all the very kind words that I've heard from everyone. It's amazing, very supportive. And I was blessed to see that on the 3 months, 7, 8, 9 months of the podcast, there were twice as many downloads as the months 1 to 6. So it's an amazing growth that is happening, and it also is an amazing growth for me as well, as a person, as a podcaster, as someone who always seeks to have interesting conversations with intriguing people, conversations that can inspire you and me as well, as the person who asks them, conversations that will inspire you to take some action towards changing and improving your life. And looking back, the decisive moment in this growth of myself as a podcaster, it was in April when the lockdown in the UK happened, and I realized that I wanted, and I had the time to do 2 episodes a week rather than 1. So that really initiated a chain of events that happened. One of them, the very important ones, was my realization about the podcast being my ikigai. So at that time in April, I started doing 2 episodes a week, and it's been an amazing journey until to now, to episode 80. I have interviewed over 60, I think it's around 70 people who I've interviewed so far. And interestingly enough, I'm looking at the paper with the statistics of the podcast. The most popular episode is number 2 with Alan Kleinams, and that's actually it's a very interesting for me, because Alan was the first person I interviewed for the Personal Development Mastery podcast, and I interviewed him a few months before I launched. And for me, Alan was an incredible and inspirational person, being a Tony Robbins trainer, international speaker, and with a story that is completely empowering, and seeing what experiences he had gone through. So for me, the interview in Alan which was the first interview, was such an important moment, because it allowed me to think bigger. And think bigger about in terms of who I could speak with and who could I have conversations with the podcast. So for that, I'm always grateful to Alan, and it's fantastic to to see his episode being always has been the number one in downloads. And the second one, and very, very interesting, is the one with Andrew Kapp, episode 67. And that's even more interesting because Andrew, the episode was published just over a month ago, and it has risen in popularity so much and gone to climb into number 2. And Andrew Kapp talked about the law of attraction. And both outstanding episodes. So I would, if you haven't listened to either of them, go back and listen, number 2 and number 67. So that was, I told you in the beginning, I had some visual cues in front of me to see what I will discuss about in the podcast. So the growth of the podcast was the first thing. And I'm grateful to you as my listener who supports the podcast, who listens to it, who has given me one of those amazing 5-star reviews on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, And if by any chance you have been meaning to give me a 5-star review and you had not yet, please take a moment and do it now. It means a lot. It allows me to have the podcast in front of other people as well who can benefit from it. So that would be very much appreciated to take 1 minute, literally 1 minute, and go to Apple Podcasts and leave me a review, a 5-star review. And so the next visual cue that I have in front of me is a small frame that I always have on my desk that has 6 of my highest values. I'm saying of my, because when I wrote it, it was about 3 years ago. They were my highest values. I still keep it as it is, even though I see now that some of my values have slightly changed or maybe changed positions, and that's not for many reasons. And I would like, in a small sense of a reflection, a personal reflection, as I said earlier, that I'm going to share with you rather than me writing it down. So on this small list of values, personal values that I hold the highest, the first one is personal growth. And I think this is indeed the very highest value in me. And looking at what I've already spoke about in this episode, it was all about growth already. So it's the first thing I will speak about. And if you let me, it's the only thing I will speak about. So that value is evident 3 years now since I wrote that little frame. Then I have health. Health, always a very important, one of the most important values for me. You know that phrase, very wise, profound phrase, that he who is healthy has 1,000 wishes. He who is sick has only one. That shows the importance of health. That's always very high on my values. Then I have learning. Still a top value. Always have enjoyed learning. I believe learning allows me to grow, which is the first value that I mentioned earlier. So I consider myself to be a lifelong learner. I always enjoy to learn, and the last few years I actually enjoy implementing what I learn as well, because I found out that just reading the books and not taking action on what you read about in the books is not doing very much good. Then I had inspiring others, and looking at it now 3 years afterwards and remembering where I was 3 years ago, this reading these words fills me with a joy of the hope that I had at that time, that I could be inspiring to others. At that time I had no idea whether I would be able to speak out to others, let alone inspire them. So it's amazing to see that I had that thought in my mind, and I was writing it down, expressing it, even though I was a very introvert person at that time, really not able to express his opinion out loud. And that's a very interesting thing to say now, speaking in front of a microphone for a podcast that is listened to over 60 countries in the world. It's an incredible journey going from one side to the other, and lots of steps along the way, transformations, some mini transformations, some really major transformations. And yeah, it's a big journey. It's a big journey. Talking about journey, the next value on my list, I had written travel, variety, adventure. And that's interesting to look at. Variety is something very important to me. If you're not familiar with the 6 human needs that Tony Robbins talks about, so one of them is the need for variety, for uncertainty, for surprise. And I'm a big need for this this particular thing, having variety, having new things, new experiences, new places. Talking about places, obviously, with the situation as it has been in 2020, this is not really something that can happen easily. So travel, adventure are a bit more restricted, even though you can find adventures even in your everyday life. And that's something I have been reframing in my head. What exactly does adventure mean? There was a point that I thought that adventure means what Lara Croft in the video game was doing. You know, exploring places and fighting, with with bad guys or Indiana Jones. But that's not the only way of adventure. You can have adventure in your life, in your growth, and that's by shifting the way that you think about what adventure is. And the last value that I have in that list of 6, it's actually not the last, it's much higher up on the list, but I left it for last to discuss it, because I think it is, out of all the other values, it is the one that I see that it becomes more difficult to maintain it and increase it or fulfill it. And that is freedom. It is something that we have in many countries, or most of the people who are listening to this have had freedom in their lives, and we tend to take it for granted. And what has been happening in 2020 from March with the COVID situation, and everything that, all the responses from the governments in the way that reacted and they keep on reacting to this situation. Really, as a reflection point for me is, and looking now at my value of freedom, I can see how it becomes more and more difficult to maintain freedom. Freedoms are actually being gradually taken from us with what is going on. We are not allowed to do things, and even our own autonomy is questioned or will be questioned very soon, the way things are going. And really, I don't want to go now into a rant about how everything was going on with COVID is gradually declining democracy and our freedoms, and this is really not the part of this podcast or this reflection, and I believe that when the time is right, then I will express my opinions and my thoughts on this whole situation. So for now I will leave it to that. All I will ask of you is to consider really what does freedom mean to you, and whether you think that what is happening in the world and the measures, lockdowns, masks, vaccines, whatever else you want to consider, whether all these things affect your freedom, and what do you think will do to your freedom in 5 years or the freedom of your children. So just something for you to consider and rant over. There is one last thing that I have in front of me, and believe me, this will cheer us up, both me and you, after what I was just saying. When I did the Unleash the Power Within, the virtual UPW with Tony Robbins last month, obviously because the Firewalk can't happen. The Firewalk is, for those of you who don't know, it's the trademark of the Tony Robbins course UPW. On the end of the first night, you have to walk across 12 feet or 4 meters of burning coals, barefoot. And it's a very transformative and empowering experience. In the virtual UPW, obviously, firewalking can't happen. But Tony Robbins found a great alternative, which in many ways it recreates the atmosphere and the feeling of achieving or breaking through something and going to the other side, as the Firewalk represents. So you break through your limitations, your fears of failure that you can't do it, and you go to the other side where there is the amazing sense of achievement, of fulfillment, of progress, of breaking through the goals. So in the virtual UPW, the equivalent of the Firewalk is called board breaking. So maybe you've seen it in karate movies where they do a karate chop and they break a board of wood. So that's what thousands of people and myself as crew member did on that evening a month ago. So before we broke the board, because that is it is a symbol. It is a symbol, as I said earlier, of breaking through to the other side of your fear and your limitation. So we were asked to write on the one side of the board our limitation, what we want to break through from when we break the wood. And on the other side, it was what we're going to break through towards. So I'm looking very fondly, actually, of this broken piece of wood that I have in front of me. And on the side of the limitations, I had written plain small and lack of self-belief. And I'm sharing this with you now for two reasons. First of all, because I think that some of you will relate. Some of you will know how it feels to know that or sense that you could be playing much bigger than you are right now, but you are playing small. And that doesn't serve neither you or the world around you. So I think, and also the lack of self-belief, that voice at the back of the head, that the inner villain, the inner critic, if you want to call it, the debilitating voice that of fear that disempowers you and stops you from taking action. So this is what I had written in the front of the wood. And I actually said that there would be two. I'm sharing this with you for two reasons. The second reason is entirely my authenticity being a part of this podcast. So this is who I am, and I'm sharing this with you, with authenticity, with vulnerability. Yes, I had written in the front of the board, playing small, lack of self-belief. So the other side of the board, the side that I've broken through, involves my identity, really, how I define myself. And that's, again, something very important. And in terms of self-reflection, my identity now is that I am a podcaster, a knowledge broker, speaker, and mentor. And embodying the identity, when you had identities that you've had for maybe 30 years, it's always a journey. So breaking through to that was something outstanding. And I'm also, another thing that I wrote on the other side is that I play my role, or my purpose if you want, with the podcast and with my sharing the message that I'm sharing, and my guests' messages, is that I am contributing to this overall shift that is happening to humanity. And it is my duty to do the best I can to contribute to this awakening. And being a knowledge broker and a podcaster allows me the opportunity to share empowering messages, and messages that promote action to grow, improve, take your life to the next level that you want. So this was my self-reflection, my very first self-reflection in front of a microphone for taking opportunity for the podcast's episode 80. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful, and I shared with you authentically. I shared with you who I am and what's in my mind, and I'm grateful that you've listened to me. And there is one last thing that I want to mention, and this is going to be time-sensitive information, so depending on when you listen to this podcast, it may not be relevant exactly as it is. However, on Monday, the 30th of November, 2020, I'm going to run a webinar at 7:30 UK time in the evening about finding your voice, and I'm going to describe my journey from being a very closed and shy person, not speaking to anyone that I didn't know well, to doing this and doing a reflection publicly in front of my podcast with authenticity. So if you're interested in the webinar, go to bit.ly/findyourvoice1. So that's bit.ly/findyourvoice1, the number 1. It will be fantastic to see you there. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast episode, which was very different and unique for me as well. I would love to hear your thoughts about what you thought about this episode, what you think about the podcast in general. Are there topics that you would like to listen more about? Are there specific people that you want me to reach out and have a conversation with for the podcast? Please reach out and share your thoughts with me. We're in this together, and I appreciate you so much for listening to Personal Development Mastery, for listening to me, and your feedback is valuable. I really want to hear from you. The easiest way to do it is either through the Facebook group Personal Development Mastery, which you can find easily, or through my website 𝘀𝗲𝗄𝗄. Thank you very much for listening, and make sure you tune in for episode 81, because the guest I have will blow your mind. Until next time, stand out, don't fit in.